Hey everyone, welcome back to ClearPath Conversations. I'm Mark Bernardin, and if you're just joining us, this is where customer journeys find direction. We just wrapped up the Path to Green mini-series, and I want to say thank you to everyone who's been following along through those episodes. We covered a lot of ground, from spotting early warning signs in at-risk accounts to building internal alignment even before you engage the customer, all the way through to how and when you share the turnaround story once you brought an account back from red to green. That series was about one thing: giving you a repeatable framework for rescuing accounts that everyone else had written off. And based on the messages that I've been getting, a lot of you are already putting those frameworks to work, and that's exactly what I want to hear. But here's the thing. Once you've turned an account around, once you've stabilized a relationship and built some momentum, you need a way to maintain that progress and demonstrate value at the executive level. That's where executive business reviews come in. And that's what we're diving into next. Starting with this episode, we're launching a 4-part mini-series on executive business reviews. Now, this isn't going to be just a generic overview of what an EBR is. We're going tactical. We're going deep. And we're going to walk through every step of preparing, delivering, and following up on an EBR that actually drives business outcomes. Today's episode is all about preparation. How do you prepare for your first EBR without burning out? How do you balance thoroughness with the reality that you're already managing a couple dozen other accounts, a handful of escalations, and a renewal forecast that's due tomorrow? Your first executive business review. It's the meeting that separates CSMs from survive from CSMs who lead. It's where you prove you're not just a note taker or a support extension. You're a strategic partner who understands the business. You drive outcomes, and you own the relationship at the executive level. And if you've never run one before, it can feel like you're standing on the edge of a cliff. Here's the thing about your first EBR. It sets the tone for every EBR that follows. If you walk in unprepared, defensive, or focused on the wrong things, executives will remember. They'll just file you away as that CSM who wastes their time. But if you walk in clear, confident, and outcome focused, you become the CSM that they trust, the one that they want in the room, the one who gets invited into strategic conversations. Your first EBR is an audition. And like any audition, the work that you do beforehand determines whether you nail it or not. I've seen CSMs spend 3 weeks preparing for an EBR and still miss the mark because they prepared for the wrong things. They built beautiful slide decks with 25 slides. They color-coded spreadsheets. They rehearsed every transition. And then the executive looked at slide 3 and said, I don't care about this. What's the business impact? All that work, all that prep, wasted. Because they never asked the most important question. What does the executive actually care about? Let me give you a real example from my time when I was at Cofense. I was prepping for my first EBR with a major financial services customer. Their CISO had been in the role for about 8 months, and they were under pressure to demonstrate ROI on some security investments. I knew this because my champion, the security operations manager, told me explicitly he needs to prove to the board that our security stack is working. So I built the entire EBR around security outcomes. Phishing simulation success rates, user reporting improvements, threat detection metrics. I walked in confident. I had great data. The slides looked professional. And 10 minutes in, the CISO stopped me and said, this is fine, but what I really need is to show operational efficiency. How are we reducing the burden on my team? My champion hadn't told me that, or maybe they didn't know. Either way, I had prepared for the wrong narrative. I pivoted in the moment. We'll talk about how we'll do that in episode 13, but it was messy. I stumbled. I referenced slides that didn't exist. I made promises I had to walk back later. That EBR should have been a home run. Instead, I was lucky to make it on base. We kept the relationship, but I didn't earn the trust that I could have. The lesson: strategic clarity comes first. You need to know, not guess, not assume, but know what the executive cares about before you build a single slide. That's where preparation starts. Not with slides, not with data, with strategic clarity. And here's the other thing about your first EBR. It's not just about the customer. It's also about your internal team. When you run a strong EBR, your account executive sees you as a strategic partner. Your manager sees you as someone who can handle enterprise accounts, product, support. They see you as someone who can translate customer needs into business context. When you run a weak EBR, you become the CSM that everyone has to cover for, the one who needs extra review, the one who isn't quite ready for the strategic accounts. I've seen careers accelerate after one great EBR, and I've also seen careers stall after one bad one. So yeah, your first EBR matters a lot. Before you schedule the meeting or start building a deck, you need to run a readiness audit on yourself and the account. I pulled this directly from my book, The Executive Business Review Playbook. This is a checklist that I use, and it's the same one that I teach to CSMs that I'm mentoring. You need to be able to answer yes to most of these before you proceed. First, strategic clarity. Do you know the executive's top priority this quarter? In their words, not yours. Can you describe your impact in one sentence? And have you tied your outcomes to specific KPIs that they're tracking? Second is proof of value. Do you have credible before and after metrics, ideally from their systems? Can you identify one tangible business outcome that you've helped deliver? And can you highlight a risk and show how you are actively mitigating that risk? Third is executive readiness. Is your deck 5 to 7 slides maximum? Have you validated your talking points through your champion? Do you know who's attending and what each person cares about? And fourth, internal alignment. Has your account executive reviewed the deck? Does product or support know you're even having the meeting? If expansion comes up, are you aligned on what to say? If you can't check most of these boxes, you're not ready yet. And that's fine. It's better to delay the EBR by a couple weeks and do it right than to rush in unprepared. Because what happens when you're not ready? The executives, they spot it immediately. They ask a question you can't answer, or they challenge a metric that you can't defend, and suddenly your credibility is shot. One bad EBR can set you back 6 months. So before we talk about timelines and prep work, make sure you pass the readiness check. If you haven't, go back. Realign with your champion, get the data you need, then come back to this episode. Now, let's assume you passed the readiness check. You're good to go. Now we need a timeline. Most CSMs either over-prepare or under-prepare. They spend 4 weeks obsessing over slides, or they throw something together 2 days before the meeting. Neither works. What does work is a structured 3-week timeline that balances thoroughness with sanity. Here's how I break it down. Week 1 is discovery and alignment. That's where you do the invisible work. You're not building slides yet. You're gathering intelligence. What you're doing this week, internal alignment sync with your account executive, your manager, anyone else who touches the account. Champion call to validate the executive's priorities and confirm who's attending. And then data pull, usage metrics, support ticket trends, adoption rates, whatever you need. And also competitive intel, if it's relevant. What else are they evaluating? What are their pain points? And a risk assessment. Is there anything we need to address head on? This week is about making sure you're not walking into that meeting blind. I've run EBRs where I thought I knew the executive's priority and my champion told me I was completely wrong. If I hadn't done the discovery call, I would have built the entire deck around the wrong narrative. One call saved me 2 weeks of work. Let me break down what each of these activities actually looks like in practice. The internal alignment sync is a 30-minute meeting with your account executive and anyone else who owns part of the customer relationship. You're answering these questions. What does the executive care about right now? Are we aligned on the account status? Is it green, yellow, or red? Is there anything happening on the sales side that I need to know about? Are we ready to talk expansion, or is this purely a retention conversation? And also, who else needs to be looped in before this meeting? I've had alignment syncs where my account executive said, actually, we're in renewal negotiations right now, and it's not going well. We should hold off on the EBR until that's resolved. That's critical information. Without that sync, I would have scheduled that EBR, walked into a tense room, and made everything worse. The champion call is where you validate everything you think you know. You're not asking your champion to review slides. You're asking them to gut check their assumptions. Questions I always ask are, what's the executive's top priority right now? And how do you know? Who's attending this meeting? And what does each person care about? Is there anything sensitive that we should avoid? Is there anything that you wish we'd address but we haven't yet? And if this meeting goes perfectly, what outcome do you want? Your champion is your EBR early warning system. They'll tell you if you're about to step on a landmine. They'll tell you if the executive is distracted by a reorg or a budget cut or a compliance audit. Listen to them. They know things that you don't. Now, the data pull is where you gather the evidence that backs up your narrative. You're pulling usage metrics, support ticket trends, adoption rates, whatever tells the story of where this account has been and where it's going. But here's the key. Don't just dump data into slides. You're not building a data warehouse. You're building a narrative. So every metric you pull should answer one of these questions. What outcome did we deliver? What risk are we mitigating? And what opportunity are we pursuing? If a metric doesn't answer one of those questions, don't include it. I've seen EBRs with 15 charts and 0 insights. Executives don't care about the chart. They care about what it means and what you're going to do about it. Now, week 2 is when you build the narrative and the deck. So now you start building, but you're not starting with slide 1. You're starting with the story. What's the narrative arc of the EBR? Where did the customer start? What have we accomplished together? Where are we going next? What do we need from the executive to get there? Once you have the narrative, the slides almost build themselves. I recommend 6 slides for the standard EBR. Slide 1 is a strategic alignment recap. This is where you prove you understand their business. Slide 2 is outcomes delivered. This is where you show impact. Slide 3 is the adoption overview. This is where you show what's working and what's not. Slide 4 is risk mitigation and opportunities. Now, this is where you show that you're thinking ahead. Slide 5 is the forward-looking roadmap. This is where you align on next steps. And Slide 6 is action items and owners. This is where you make it all real. 6 slides. That's it. If you need more than 6 slides, you're probably overcomplicating it. Executives don't want to sit through 25 slides. They want clarity, confidence, and a plan. While you're building the deck, you're also drafting 2 other critical assets. The 1-page executive summary that you're going to be sending before the meeting, and also the follow-up email template that you're going to be sending after the meeting. Don't wait until the day before the meeting to write these. Write them now in this step while the narrative is fresh. Week 3 is rehearse, refine, get it locked down. This is the week that you tighten everything up. What you're doing, you have an internal dry run with your account executive and your manager. They should challenge you and try to poke holes in your narrative. Have a champion review. Send the deck to your champion and make sure that there are no surprises. Do a final data refresh. Make sure that your metrics are current, up to date. And also contingency planning. What if the executive cancels? What if they bring somebody new in? What if they ask about that one thing that you hoped that they wouldn't? Because they will. And then you rehearse. Not just reading through the slides, actually presenting out loud. Time yourself. Practice your transitions. Know where you're going to pause and also where you're going to ask for input. I've seen CSMs who were brilliant strategists just bomb an EBR because they didn't practice their delivery. They stumbled over words. They lost their place. They looked uncertain. And executives, they don't trust uncertainty. So practice until it feels natural. Not scripted, natural. Let me tell you what a good rehearsal actually looks like. The internal dry run it's not a friendly review. This is where you want your account executive and your manager to challenge you. Tell them, I need you to ask me the hardest questions that you can think of. I need you to poke holes in my narrative. I need you to just tell me where I'm going to lose a room. The questions that they'll ask are probably the same questions that the executive will ask. Better to stumble in the dry run than in the actual meeting. I've had dry runs where my manager said, this slide doesn't make sense. What are you actually trying to say here? And you know what? They were right. The slide was confusing. I buried the lead. So I fixed it before the meeting. That's the whole point of the dry run. Not to make you feel good, but to make you better. The champion review happens about 3 days before the meeting. Send your deck off to your champion, not for approval, but for validation. Ask them, is there anything in here that is going to surprise the executive? Is there anything that we should add or remove? Are we framing this in a way that really resonates? Your champion knows the executive better than you do. If they say that something isn't going to land, believe them. I've had champions tell me to cut entire slides because the CTO doesn't care about that level of detail. I've had champions add context that I didn't know, like, oh, by the way, the CFO is going to be there too. So make sure you tie everything back to cost savings. That's gold. That's the kind of intel that turns a good EBR into a great one. Rehearsing your delivery is where most people cut corners. Don't. Here's how I rehearse. I present the deck out loud, standing up, as if the executive is in the room with me. I time myself. I practice my transitions. I rehearse how I'm going to handle any interruptions. I practice saying things like, that's a great question. Let me address that on our next slide. Or I want to make sure that we have time for discussion, so let me move through this quickly. Or before we dive in, let me set some context so this makes sense. I practice where I'll pause and also where I'll ask for input, where I'll slow down for emphasis, where I'll speed up because the detail really isn't critical. And here's the key. I don't memorize a script. I memorize the flow. I know what each slide is about, what point it's making, and how it connects to the next slide. When you memorize the flow, you can adapt. When you memorize a script, you panic the moment something goes off script. Now, by the end of week 3, you should feel pretty confident. Not perfect, but confident. You know your narrative, you know your data, you know where you might get challenged and how you're going to respond. That's when you're ready. Let's talk about where CSMs waste time during their EBR prep. Things you should absolutely prepare. A tight narrative that answers, do you understand our business? What outcomes have you delivered? Where are we at risk? What's the plan? Clean visual slides with minimal text and clear takeaways. A one-page executive summary for attendees who couldn't make the meeting. Talking points for every slide, including how you're going to handle any tough questions. And internal alignment so everyone knows what you're saying and what you're committing to. Things you shouldn't waste time on. Perfecting slide transitions and animations. No one cares. Building backup slides just in case. If you need backup slides, your main deck isn't tight enough. Rehearsing a script word for word. You're going to sound robotic. Apologizing in advance for things that might not go perfectly. Confidence matters more than perfection. And creating 15 versions of the same deck because you can't decide which chart looks better. Here's a rule I live by. If it doesn't directly support your narrative or answer a question the executive is going to ask, cut it. Every slide, every bullet point, every chart, it needs to earn its place. 48 hours before the EBR, I run through a final pre-flight checklist. This is straight out of the Executive Business Review playbook, and it's saved me more times than I can count. Logistics. Meeting invite confirmed with correct time zone. Deck loaded into the meeting platform. Test it. Executive summary sent to all attendees 24 hours in advance. Calendar hold for 30 minutes after the meeting for debrief. Next, content. All metrics current as of yesterday. No broken links or placeholder text. Slide numbers match what you're referencing. Action items are specific and assigned to owners. Also, stakeholder alignment. The AE knows what you're presenting and what you might ask for. The champion knows what you'll be calling on them for validation. Internal escalation owner is identified if risk comes up. And finally, contingency planning. Plan B if the executive cancels last minute. Plan C if someone derails the meeting with an off-topic question. Plan D if they ask the one question that you hope they wouldn't. I've had executives cancel 10 minutes before the meeting. I've had meetings where the CTO brought the CFO without warning, and suddenly I'm talking ROI instead of technical adoption. You can't predict everything, but you can prepare for the most likely scenarios. And when something unexpected happens, you can adapt because you know your material cold. Let's be real. EBR prep is time-consuming. And if you're managing a portfolio of a couple dozen accounts, you don't have 3 weeks to dedicate to one meeting. So, how do you prepare without burning out? You set boundaries on prep time. I block 4 hours in week 1, 6 hours in week 2, and 3 hours in week 3. That's it. 13 hours total spread across 3 weeks. If I can't build a solid EBR in 13 hours, I'm overcomplicating it. Use templates. I have a standard 6-slide EBR template that I customize for every account. I'm not starting from scratch every time. The structure is the same. The narrative framework is the same. I'm just plugging in account-specific details. If you don't have a template yet, build one after your first EBR. Capture what worked, lock in the structure, and reuse it. Delegate the data pull. If you have a CSM operations team or a data analyst, let them pull the metrics. You shouldn't be spending 3 hours exporting usage data from 5 different systems. Your job is to interpret the data and tell the story. Someone else can pull the numbers. Rehearse in bite-sized chunks. Don't try to rehearse the entire deck in one sitting. Practice 2 slides today, 2 slides tomorrow. By the time you get to week 3, you've already rehearsed every slide multiple times. And ask for help. If you're stuck, ask your manager or a peer CSM to review your deck. A fresh set of eyes will spot things that you missed or give you confidence that you're headed down the right track. Burnout happens when you try to do everything yourself and hold yourself to an impossible standard. Give yourself permission to be prepared, not perfect. Here's what I tell every CSM I mentor. If you're not ready, don't run the EBR. I know that sounds extreme, but hear me out. A bad EBR does more damage than no EBR. It erodes trust. It makes the executive question whether you understand the business, and it puts you in a defensive position for the next 6 months. I've delayed EBRs before. I've told my champion, I don't have the data I need to make this meeting valuable. Can we just push it off 2 weeks? And you know what happened? They said yes, because They'd rather have a great meeting in 2 weeks than a mediocre meeting today. If you're scrambling to finish slides the night before the meeting, stop. Reschedule. If you don't know the executive's priority, stop. Reschedule. If your internal team isn't aligned, stop. Reschedule. Your credibility is more valuable than hitting a deadline. Your first EBR is the moment you step out of the reactive, tactical world of day-to-day CSM work and into the strategic, executive level conversation. It's where you prove you're not just managing accounts, you're driving business outcomes. And if you do it well, everything changes. You get invited to renewal conversations earlier. You get pulled into expansion discussions. Executives start asking for you by name. That's the power of a well-run EBR. But it starts with preparation. Not perfection. Preparation. Know your narrative. Know your data. Know your audience. And show up ready to lead. In the next episode, we're going slide by slide through the 6-slide EBR framework. I'm going to show you exactly what each slide should say, what questions it should answer, and how to build a narrative that executives actually care about. If you want the EBR preparation checklist and timeline that I walked through today, you can grab it at clearpathcx.com. It's the same checklist that I use and the same one that I teach in my workshops. If you're reading the Executive Business Review Playbook, this episode maps directly to Chapter 3. The book goes deeper on internal alignment, stakeholder mapping, and how to handle objections before they come up in a meeting. Connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Mark Bernardin. If you're preparing for your first EBR and you have questions, drop me a message. I read every one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for showing up and delivering every single day. I'll talk to you soon.